ROM hacks in fan games are a pretty common element of the Mega Man community. People taking existing games and editing them for cosmetic or improvement purposes, or just making their own original games. A lot of attention has been given to fan creations for the classic Mega Man series, but less so on Mega Man X. Since the X series is my favorite, I thought I'd make a dedicated video about Mega Man X ROM hacks. I got the idea a couple years back when somebody commented on my Mega Man X1 revisit telling me about a ROM hack called Mega Man X The New Order. I thought it looked interesting, back-pocketed the video idea, and now I'm here to give it a try. Mega Man X The New Order is a ROM hack geared around the item collection element of the original X. In case you didn't know, the experience of getting all the collectibles in the early X games is a major focus of my videos on them, and something I often praise is when the games allow you to map out your route through the game however you want, while also making it possible to get every collectible without revisiting stages a bunch. Preferably if it takes skill and strategy to find the route through the game. In the case of X1, the game does allow creativity like this, though you're held back by how you would need to start with Chill Penguin's stage because that's where you find the leg parts of the armor that let X dash and dash jump. These abilities are required for every other part of the armor, so your freedom and routing is limited by that. And you would need to revisit at least one stage by the end to get full completion. In my run, that would be Chill Penguins for the heart tank. 2 revisits technically if you count the Hadouken move, which I always get, so there's that. This doesn't make the game less fun, just not as open-ended as X2 or X4. So anyway, Mega Man X The New Order by the developer, Corius, aimed to improve this element of the original X. The most important change is that the mod allows you to get any of the first armor pieces in whatever order you want. It does that by allowing you to jump around the dash boots, so you don't have to get them if you don't want to, and the level design has been altered to allow you to easily reach the head, body, and arm parts without the dash. I decided to grab the body parts first, and it looks very cursed when you play it since this was simply impossible in the original game. And the mod includes a cool extra where you get a shortcut through some areas by using the head parts, which is a welcome change because that was by far the most useless upgrade in the original game. However, the mod would never replace the original for me because it goes too far with its changes. For example, it has changed the game to where items are required for virtually nothing. There's a ladder underneath the Boomer Kuwanger heart tank, a ladder above the Spark Mandrill sub-tank, the igloo surrounding the Chill Penguin heart tank was removed, the blocks guarding the sub-tank and Flame Mammoth were also removed. That was my main issue with the mod. It simplified the game to where the routing was non-existent because you can get everything with little or no effort. You'd need the dash boots or the arm parts and shotgun ice to get the Sting Chameleon heart tank, but that was about all I noticed. That's why I said I like it when the item game takes effort to map out at least backtracking Route 4. That's the fun part. Giving all the items out like candy doesn't hit the same. I'd have done it to where the armor system is the same as this, and almost every other item remains untouched. Maybe I'd just make the igloo destructible from a weapon other than Fire Wave so you wouldn't need to backtrack for it, but I respect the intention of the mod, and I'm glad I got to talk about it like I promised in the comments of a years old video. But we aren't done with X1 ROM hacks, because I'm sure the one most fans thought of when clicking on this video was the famous Mega Man X hard type ROM hack developed by Heart Hunt. The hack is exactly what it sounds like. It takes the original Mega Man X and overhauls it into a supremely difficult game for true masters of the OG X. I've been curious to try the game for years because, as you may know, Mega Man X is a game I've played maybe 1,000 times, probably more. So I was really curious to see what an uber difficult X1 experience looks like, and the mod did not disappoint. Here's how you play it. And for that matter, here's how you play all the ROM hacks for X1 through X3. You download the file from the link below and extract it to whatever folder you want. You will also need the ROM of the original game and a tool called Lunar IPS. This is how you're going to patch the game file. You'll be prompted to click on the IPS file, which is the hack, and then the game, and bam, the game is patched. You best back up the original game so you still have access to the unaltered game, or go find another copy, but that's your choice. For Mega Man X hard type, there are 2 versions, hard type and soft type. The former changes a bunch of stuff about the game that we'll get into, including the level design. The latter keeps all those changes to AI and such, but leaves the level design from the OG intact. So naturally, I'm going to play the full hard type experience. ROM hacks like these, from my experience, can be hit or miss. When done right, a really tough game can be a lot of fun, especially if it's a challenge for a game you know pretty well. But sometimes it might just turn into an obnoxious affair where enemies and instant kill hazards are placed all over the screen. A hard mode ROM hack like that is far less fun to overcome than one that's totally fair. Mega Man X hard type had me very impressed with how balanced and thoughtful it was. Right from the beginning, you can see how this mod is made for people who have a firm grasp of Mega Man X physics. In the intro stage, there'll be jumps where you can barely make it, and I just intuited that by looking at it. And then there will be jumps that you can't make, and then you need to get creative and think to ride this car off the ledge to make the jump. The intro stage sets the scene for the whole ROM hack as it makes a lot of changes exactly like that. such as when you're in Flame Mammoth stage and you need to jump on this giant head from the conveyor belt, but let it fall into the lava to give yourself a platform to jump ahead from. But you obviously need to do it before it goes all the way in. Or when you're navigating the cave of Chill Penguin but it's a bottomless pit. Or the part where you're waiting for the enemies in Sting Chameleon that toss platforms at you to give you one to land on over a bottomless pit. Or seeing your Mega Man X platforming skills put to the ultimate test in Boomer Kuwanger's stage because the tower climb at the end sees you wall jumping and fighting enemies in a room littered with spikes. Each level has been thoughtfully rebuilt to take elements that longtime X players have seen a million times and remix them into a far more challenging game. Boss fights have also been overhauled too. Many patterns and attacks will be familiar, but the rooms will change, like a giant hole in the ground during Boomer Kuwanger's battle or lava on the floor of Flame Mammoths. There will be spikes that do a lot of damage spaced around the arena of Storm Eagle, electric walls in Spark Mandrill's boss room, or mud you fall into at the bottom of Sting Chameleon's. You also have a very small weapon ammo count, so you can't spam weaknesses to victory in this either. You gotta fight their patterns to the best of your ability while also avoiding the new obstacles. And then the item game is more difficult too, like how you need to keep your ride armor functioning long enough in Chill Penguin stage to dash jump off a ledge, punch an igloo with the right timing to then do it again, jump off and get the heart tank. Or frequently you need to use Shotgun Ice Charge Shot to get through obstacles for an upgrade. In fairness, not everything the mod does is an attempt to make the game unforgiving. The new levels require the dash jump, so the leg parts are unlocked from the moment you beat the intro stage. And then, best of all, X hard type doesn't have lives. Instead, the pause screen keeps a death count up. Getting game overs and redoing the whole level here would be kryptonite, so giving you infinite lives makes the challenge more approachable. I just thought it was an impressive and intelligently designed hack of X1 in a genre of ROM hack that could have been really annoying or poorly done. This one really stood out. If you love X1, I'd say give this a shot. There are plenty of other ROM hacks for X1, like playing as Proto Man or Zero, but I thought the two I just talked about would cover this game pretty well. I wasn't really sure what I was going to find for Mega Man X2 since the game is basically perfect, so it's not like I was easily imagining improvement projects for this game, and the game is also less popular than X1, so I'd imagine less people were jumping in to give it random mods. But I did find some cool stuff. First, there's the Ultimate Armor hack by programmer Peru. This changes X2 by allowing you to use the Ultimate Armor from X4 through 6. But it's not just cosmetic. You actually have X4's Plasma Shot and the Nova Strike. You don't have the X4 hover move, but that's okay. You don't really need that in X2. The Plasma Shot is as devastating as ever, just by looking at how it tears up the intro boss. But then the Nova Strike wasn't as good though. To use it, you need to jump and press R, but I found it way more finicky than it sounds. Sometimes it would work, and then other times it just wouldn't do anything, so I thought the integration of that ability left a lot to be desired. Worst thing is, the mod comes with two versions, an easy mode and a hard mode. I used the hard mode option because I'd said it was going to make the bosses more difficult, and I thought that would be better balanced since I have the Nova Strike. But definitely don't use this. All it does to make bosses more difficult is just make them inexplicably impervious to your attacks for long stretches of time. Wire Sponge is the same boss here that he was in the OG game, but you're just unable to hit him for no real reason. The easy mode is just the same game, but you have the ultimate armor, so go with that one. I thought that was going to be it for X2 though, but then I found a hack called Mega Man X2 Alpha by myself the third. It looked like a hard type equivalent for X2, so I decided to give it a go. It did start off pretty promising. The intro stage was made appropriately more difficult, and the boss at the end had more obstacles to avoid, but then the more I played this, the more I felt like it was the bad kind of hard mode that I was talking about prior to discussing X1 hard type. Some parts were good, like making the elevator section of Wire Sponge more difficult to navigate, or when you have to use the slippery physics in Crystal Snail's level to climb up from side to side. I thought that was some of the best material here, but then a lot of levels in this just became pit and enemy spam. In Wheel Gator, having to use the moving platform to steer through a more complex room is a good idea, but then when 1,000 enemies are also on the screen, it just becomes annoying. But then when I was playing Morph Moth and Bubble Crab stages, I was just starting to become numb to the design. I was basically bum rushing and damage boosting through since the design wasn't that complex. It was a lot of enemies everywhere. Some mini-bosses are tougher and some can be killed in 2 seconds. Some boss rooms have been changed to be more challenging, like spikes and platforms for the Overdrive Ostrich fight, but then others are just different, but not much more difficult, such as the Bubble Crab room. You don't get infinite lives in this either, so that also counted against it for me. The weirdest thing about this one was how you play it though. It installs with a bunch of folders for each level, and you can play in any order, but the game only works for that level. Like, you'll load the intro stage folder, and then you'll start the game and play the stage, and once you reach the level select, you save your state, load the folder for whatever level you want to play next, and when it boots up, you load the state and play the level that folder was meant for, rinse and repeat for each one. It's an oddly designed ROM hack for sure. And it's not a bad one, but I'm just saying that I definitely enjoyed Mega Man X hard type more. While researching this video, I found out that Heart Hunt actually did start a hard-type mod for X2. It was only an alpha, and that was last updated in 2017, but I was curious to see if this was more what I was looking for. From videos on YouTube, it definitely is more of that physics understanding type level design, looks more reasonable than Mega Man X2 Alpha, but I say looks and seems because I didn't play it. I downloaded from the source and patched the ROM myself, but it just wouldn't work. It would only load the vanilla game. I even tried a different ROM. So maybe somebody else can run it, I just wasn't able to, so that's where the X2 portion of this video is going to end, unfortunately. Mega Man X3 is a special game to me. If you've seen any of my videos on it, you'd know that. But it's also a special game for me in the realm of ROM hacks because the biggest one for this game is the one that really got me interested in emulating and ROM hacking back in 2015 when I was first playing these games. And that is, of course, Mega Man X3 The Zero Project, developed by Justin3009. This is a top-to-bottom improvement project that takes everything that didn't really work about X3 and fixes it. X3 is a game that's close to being as great as X1, 2, and 4, but it has a lot of design choices that are odd or ill-conceived that make the game less good than the ones surrounding it. But I still love it anyway. The Zero Project is a mod that's so great because it makes X3 as good as those other 3 perfect Mega Man X games. The project was considered finished by version 4.8, and I had been playing it for a long time before then and seeing it evolve into its final form, as I'd play it and replay it again and again and again. Where the original X3 went wrong with its new features, like wouldn't it be cool if X could find different ride armors to use? Yeah, but let's make it so you need to grab this specific one before you can use any of them. That makes no sense. Or let's make it so that X can collect additional light capsules to enhance parts of the third armor, but if you do it, you can't collect the golden armor upgrade at the end that gives you all enhancements at once. Just stupid ideas. Or let's add Zero as a playable character, but he can't really collect anything or fight any bosses, and if he dies once, you can't use him again for the rest of the game. Like, what a stupid idea. What the Zero Project offers is a version of this game where Zero is a fully implemented playable character who can fight bosses, collect heart tanks, and Dr. Light capsules and all that. Zero can't use light capsules, keeping in continuity with later games, but he can collect them on X's behalf. You wouldn't really need them for Zero anyway, as he starts with a double jump and the double shot saber combo, making him the go-to character in the early levels because he's so powerful compared to base X, who is made of glass in this game. You can even start the game as Zero if you wish, and see him get captured by Mac and rescued by X. You can switch characters in the main levels by pausing the game and hitting R or hitting the icon at the top of the level select screen. But the greatness of the Zero Project only starts with Zero being playable. Like I said, he paid attention to everything the OG game got wrong. Zero has the ability to smash these rocks and tunnel Rhino with his Z-Saber, and this completely blows the item game of X3 wide open. Because of this, you no longer need to backtrack to Tunnel Rhino's stage at the end of the game, and in fact, you can get the head parts as your first armor piece. The head parts also got an upgrade that halves the special weapon ammo that X uses, when Zero's is doubled at default, really highlighting the idea that Zero is more powerful than X at the start, but X can become more powerful later on. As a result, I mainly use X once I clear a couple of stages because he's better to use by then. From Tunnel Rhino, you can then go to Neon Tiger and get the arm parts via Zero's double jump. And look at this, X can't achieve this at all in the original game. It was just quite a sight to behold when I first played this. X's arm part charge shot is faster and more fun to use, some items are given more fun methods of getting, the ride armors can be used after collecting one, regardless of whether or not you found the Chimera armor first. The enhancement chips all work, but you can only use one at a time. But if you get them all, you can still get the golden armor later, and Zero's black armor alongside it. It's improvements like this which allow you to just enjoy X3 more than you ever could in any other version. The Zero Project is a perfect Mega Man X game, and I have no problem saying that, showing how close X3 is to being that, but the game just fumbles on its new ideas, but luckily a fan was able to step in and give us such a perfect rendition of the game, even including a save feature and a New Game Plus option. I cannot recommend Zero Project of X3 enough, it's fantastic. The developer was also making one for X2, but it ended up being abandoned, and I understand why. He'd been doing the X3 one for years, and you just get burned out, I assume. Although I have played it, you beat the X Hunters and then get Zero as a playable character. It's a neat reward, but it's not very necessary. It doesn't really do anything for X2. By the time you get Zero, you'd be at least 5 levels in, so X is already more powerful than Zero anyway. But I figured I'd mention that it does exist, and you can play it in its beta form, but that's about it for this game. As I have alluded to before, Mega Man X4, just like X2, is virtually perfect, to the point where you can't really imagine a hack of X4 meant to improve the experience. But there is one, Ace Diaz's Undub mod for Mega Man X4. The scripts for the Mega Man X games come with many inaccuracies to the original Japanese dialogue. ROM hacks to fix these for X1 through X4 all exist. You can even download them for the Mega Man X Legacy Collection, which I talked about in my 2021 video on X4. I figured I'd bring up these in X4's segment because this game has more dialogue and story than the first three, so the shitty script is worse. And the game has these cutscenes with horrendous English acting. The Undub mod rewrites the in-game dialogue with a sleeker looking font, and it uses the Japanese audio for the cutscenes with English subtitles. As I said many years ago, I found this to make the story more compelling since I buy into the emotions more than I ever could when playing the English version.
Zero, if I become a maverick, you have to take care of me.
Don't be ridiculous. Now hurry on back.
Promise me. Zero.
Zero, もし俺がイレギュラー化したら、君が処理してくれ。
バカなこと言ってないで、さっさと戻ってこい。
約束だよ、ゼロ。
It does have some minimal gameplay changes like disabling the double dash input, but the mod is pretty much X4 exactly how you remember it, but with different dialogue. Moving on to X5, there actually is quite a lot to work with for an improvement project. So much so that two different ones have been made, X5 Improvement Project and X5 Ends Edition. I had played the improvement projects by Ace Diaz of X5 and X6 years ago, but I never played Ends Edition of either one, so I decided to start there. To patch the PlayStation Mega Man X games, you need this thing called X Delta Patcher. The process works pretty much exactly the same as Lunar IPS, but it requires a different application. Anyway, Ends Edition of X5 makes a lot of balance changes to the game, like removing Alia's interruptions from the gameplay, and it removes the boss level thing from the original. In the OG game, depending on how many hours were left before the colony crashed, the boss level would increase. A higher level unlocked the new parts system, which is just too convoluted. So now you unlock parts by beating bosses. Boss battles have all been balanced effectively, and then certain upgrades are a lot less tedious to get. For example, you don't have to play Tidal Whales level 3 times to 100% the game. These are all good changes, especially if you want the X5 experience to remain somewhat consistent with the original game. However, I must say I was pretty spoiled because I already played the X5 Improvement Project long before I played Ends Edition, and the former project made a lot more changes to the experience, which really transformed X5 in my eyes. Since I've already talked about a lot of the mods and hacks for X5 through X8, I figured I'd include those segments from those videos in this one. Thought it would be incomplete otherwise. Plus, some of those are older and you may not have seen them, and some of them have newer updates and developments I can add in. So strap in and enjoy. Or take off if you've seen it all before and don't need to know any of the tiny new details. Either way, thanks for watching. But now we can talk about X5 Improvement Project. You can find the full list of changes on the forum post with the download link, but to highlight the ones that really impacted my play experience, first, Alia can now be disabled from the menu, so you will not be interrupted while trying to play the stages. The level design is still not the best thing in the world, but all the other major issues I have with X5 have been improved. The translation's been fixed like you did for X4, so the story is more enjoyable. Cutscenes can now all be skipped, including in-game cutscenes with the Mavericks. Duff McWhalen's stage has been made much faster so that you won't be bored out of your skull playing it. The Maverick names have all been changed to their original names. I haven't mentioned that thus far, but each Maverick in America is based on Guns N' Roses, with many fans just preferring them to have the names they were meant to. Crescent Grizzly, Tidal Whale, Volt Kraken, Shining Firefly, Dark Necrobat, Spiral Pegasus, Burn Dino Rex, and Spike Rose Red. I think these are better and more consistent Maverick names, but I just kept using the translated names when writing this script because I'm more used to it. In terms of gameplay tweaks, I already mentioned the lack of Alia, but things got really interesting when you first find out that all the heart tanks work with both characters, so that problem is fixed. Collecting all 4 pieces of the shuttle guarantees success, while launching it with no parts guarantees failure, creating clear and effective parameters to achieve the good and bad endings, which is such a great improvement. You no longer need to burn several game hours to unlock parts. Instead, finished stages will grant you both the parts that the stage would have unlocked. But it's not broken because you can only equip so many at a time. Having access to all the parts in X5 was so interesting for me because it allowed me to experiment with them in a way I never have before. And getting a speed increase while increasing the range of, say, the Z-Saber really made the game a lot more fun. It allowed the stages to feel more fast-paced even if the designs aren't as good as the best of X2 or X4. The mother of all improvements being the item game. I got so excited reading that the item game got enhanced, and this got me curious on what the possibilities were now. To give some highlights, using the lightning ability, X can get the heart tank and light capsule from Tidal Whale stage, completely removing those two awful backtracks. You can also get the light capsule with a charged spike ball. Zero's Twin Dream move can get the head parts of the Gaia armor. Zero can push these blocks out of the way that were once Gaia armor exclusive. And on the subject of armors, collecting the pieces gives you limited functionality that is boosted when you collect all of them, a perfect remedy for the problem introduced in the original game. This really got my mind racing to think of the possibilities. I collected every item within 90 minutes in the improved project, when in the original I'd still be grinding by the 2-hour mark. That's how much of an effect these changes have on the gameplay. That's just a list of changes that were important to me, but there are even more to look into if you're curious. The link is below. So, to put it simply, I'd say that X5 Ends Edition is the original game, but more streamlined, but the Improvement Project is like a full fix-it project, changing everything to be better. And now, this is the part where I'd compare X6 Ends Edition with the Tweaks mod from Ace Diaz, but when going to the developer of the Ends Edition's channel, I see the download links for X6 and X7 have been removed. Apparently it's because he's working on an update for both. Personally, I would keep the game up as is while working on the next one, but that's just me. So since I never played X6 Ends Edition before, I can't talk about it because it's not currently playable. Luckily I have played X7, but we can get back to that in a moment. So we can instead just use this time to talk about the masterpiece that is Ace Diaz's X6 Tweaks project. X6 and I go way back, once being my most hated game of all time. Nowadays, I have kinda tamed the beast. I don't think X6 is good. It's a piece of shit, actually, but I'm good enough at X6 to not really mind playing it for the most part. Still, I haven't played it in almost 2 years at this point. I don't tend to revisit it. But still, X6 Tweaks is a night and day difference. Starting with the story, X6's translation is one of the worst in series history, typos and odd sentences aplenty. But the Tweaks project fixes all that and makes the game's plot shine through and shows that it's actually pretty interesting stuff, as I talked about a few years ago. But the gameplay is the focus of this video, so... The aim of the project is to remove padding and other unneeded elements from X6 to overall make the game more balanced. The amount of things changed in the X6 Tweaks project is insane. You'd need to check out the README in order to see it all, but to, again, list the highlights. Things have been streamlined significantly. For example, X can now use his armor pieces without collecting the full set. X and Zero share all heart tanks, life ups, energy ups, nightmare soul count, and rank. This means all the souls you collected that allow you to use parts as X don't have to be recollected as Zero, which was just needless padding. Parts allowance per rank has been edited so that you can use at least one part from the start of the game. Useless rescuable Reploids with no parts have been removed, corrupted Reploids respawn after you have to kill them, meaning no parts are missable, unarmored X as well as Shadow Armor X have been given an air dash, which comes in handy in one of the most infamous segments from the end of the game. Zero and Shadow Armor X's ability to leap to the ceiling has been extended, giving it more functionality. Zero's techniques have much more comfortable button mapping, meaning the Abyss dive won't happen. The characters have all had their cutscene portraits redrawn to look more appealing, and I think they look quite nice, especially in the case of Sigma here. And what I consider the most interesting of the changes would be how full bits of level design have been altered to make the game more approachable, like extending the ceiling in Commander Yamark's stage to avoid the blind spike jump I complained about in 2017. The jump length needed to get the Shadow Armor part in Metal Shark player stage has been decreased. Secret Lab 1 has removed a few spikes at the beginning to make the ice block the only thing X needs to get through the area, and Secret Lab 2 has added a platform below this part right here. So it's never a concern as to whether or not X can make the jump depending on what armor or part you have. All these things were done to make the game more approachable, but what is very interesting is that the developer has made some tweaks that serve to make the game more difficult as well. It sounds crazy, but remember, I don't think of X6 as this super hard game solely. I think of it as this game that's incredibly broken, and an uneven scaling of the difficulty was part of that. For example, the game sports things someone on their first playthrough would be heavily blindsided by, which would cost them a lot of lives. And then they have a really easy boss fight right after that. Now, Reploids don't refill your health, nor do they grant you extra lives. But the default life count has been raised from 2 to 4, and the EX tank raises it from 4 to 6. For the first time in a Mega Man X video, I'm actively telling you that the EX tank is useful. What a concept. You do need to watch out though, because getting a game over will now send you back to the start of the stage. This adds some real stakes to the game. In the original, I'd get to this part of, say, Rainy Turtloid stage and just damage boost my way to the Shadow Armor part. There's no reason not to, because death, even in the event of a game over, just sends you back a few feet. But I had to consider my approach when losing my lives meant going back to the start of the stage. Bosses like Commander Yamark have been edited to take less damage, but the Nightmare Mother boss has his health bar cut in half. See what I mean? Things that were ridiculously hard were made easier, and things that were comically easy have been made more difficult, and the game adds more organic challenges by making your lives worth more, as opposed to that talking point from my original video. Again, fake difficulty. There are so many great improvements here that really contribute to the playability of Mega Man X6, but as if that wasn't enough for you, he also released the Mega Man X6 Tweaks Patcher. What this does is allow you to completely customize how the game will be changed. You can change your dash speed and length, you can customize whether or not Shadow Armor X can cancel his saber swings, you can set how much damage every attack does to each enemy, mini-boss, and boss fight, you can set which nightmare effects are on, or just none at all, my personal favorite. You can choose what portrait art you want, what title screen you like, and the list indeed goes on. I love customization in games, and being able to edit Mega Man X6 to where I become a god and beat the final boss in 5 seconds while dashing over a whole stage, which is like an ain't no thing, is definitely a ton of fun. Seriously, I love the work they did with this game. I say, great job to all parties involved. Fixing X6 was a really unthinkable prospect to me, but it was done. Now, Mega Man X7 is one of the assiest games to ever exist, from slow and dull gameplay to terrible level design and weapons and storytelling and literally everything a game could do wrong, so surely fixing that game is undoable, right? Well, no, evidently not. I made a whole video on this last year, but X7 Ends Edition shows us that it's entirely possible to make an infinitely more palatable X7 experience. One of X7's biggest crimes is its dreadfully slow pacing, and if I were to say what almost all the major changes from Ends Edition are, they would be related to speed and pacing. Real-time cutscenes couldn't be skipped in this game, but one of the first things I noticed with the patch is that you can fast forward through the real-time cutscenes. It's not an outright skip button, but it makes the scenes go by significantly quicker, keeping you in the action far more. Also making the scenes kind of remind me of SA2 with how the characters talk over each other when you fast forward through the scenes, which was pretty funny.
Wait a second.
Are you stupid?
Are you...
Incident? What are you talking about? Oh, here it comes. So I'll be seeing ya.
Unfortunately, nothing was done about the auditory torture that can occasionally emerge while playing X7, so Flame Hyanard's boss fight and Alia's calls will still be a bother. But back to the pacing, the menu design of X7 was another huge contributor to its slow pace. Like how you were introduced to the Maverick bosses and their levels, with each character of text going by at the speed of molasses. This can be sped up in the patched version. In the original, you'd rescue the 16 Reploids in each stage and have to see their names slowly appear on this list one by one. Now it occurs in about 1 second. This is the kind of thing that's just such a no-brainer that you can't possibly conceive of how it got like this in the original release of the game. And speaking of rescuable Reploids, in the original game you have to save 64 of them to unlock Mega Man X as a playable character. This is, at minimum, 4 stages, half of the game before playing as the title character. In the new edition, you need to only rescue 32 of them. This sounds like a lot, but I just did Ride Borsky first and then Vanishing Gungaroo and got 32 of them that way, and thus I unlocked Mega Man X within 2 stages and got to playing as him. It really feels a lot better paced this way. Nabbing every rescuable Reploid is also less troublesome because they can take multiple hits before dying, so the do-or-die component of this system isn't as bad as it was in the OG X7. Then upgrades like the heart tanks go to all 3 characters as well, so you don't have to worry about any character being at a disadvantage if you don't play as them as often. Something I noticed when Axel's health bar was the same size as X and Zero, despite the fact that I hadn't played as him in a while. Another sizable issue with X7 was just the way it handled. Sometimes doing basic actions like wall jumping would be super janky as the characters would get stuck to the wall. Ends Edition doesn't outright fix it, but it's much easier to perform those classic moves. When getting hit in X7, you'd fall over and need to wait for the character to get up. This wasn't removed either because one of the perks of X's glide armor is that it protects him from this, but for Zero, Axel, and X without the armor, getting up is much faster, which again greatly benefits the pace of the game. All of the attacks are much quicker too. Zero's saber combo has the delay between attacks significantly reduced, so he's much more fun to play as now, quickly shredding enemies. And he can now turn in mid-air after a slash. Axel's copy shot is much more viable now because charging it up takes way less time, and bullet sponge enemies are a lot easier to deal with. Take these walls with targets on them as an example. Blasting through them doesn't take too long, so you barely notice them. And this goes for mini-bosses too. In Radio Tower, the mini-boss just goes on and on and on in the original because it has so much health and spends much of the fight completely impervious to damage. In N's edition, the spin cycle is way faster, and I cleared it after the first cycle of invulnerability. This effect also goes for bosses, which have all been improved. The biggest issue with most X7 bosses is that the designer's solution to having two characters teamed up at all times was to give bosses these huge health bars and to make the damage output really low. Combine that with lengthy invincibility frames and the result is some pretty rancid battles. Bosses have been adjusted on a case-by-case basis. A battle like Soldier Stone Kong or Ride Borsky were so boring because of the issues I just laid out. So they were fixed by receiving more damage from your basic attacks and having less health. But then a battle like Splash Warfly could be defeated in record time compared to the rest. This boss is more difficult now because he didn't just dive in the water and re-emerge to just be hit by the weakness again. He sent missiles after me, which forced me to jump to the other platforms. Surprising me, since I was staying on my toes during an X7 boss I always thought was easy. Though, looking back on the trailer description, this might also be because I didn't use his new weakness. I didn't even realize this before playing, but the developer altered the boss weakness chain and listed the new one in the description. It now goes Soldier Stone Kong, Tornado Tunyon, Flame Hyanard, Splash Warfly, Snipe Anteater, Wind Crowrang, Vanishing Gungaroo, and Ride Borsky. God, these are the stupidest Mavericks in series history, but you work with what you got. The special weapons have all been made more powerful and practical, like the Gaia Shield destroying smaller enemies immediately, or the other weapons just doing more damage. But I still didn't really use them much. X7 is like many of the later X games in that the X-Buster and the Z-Saber were so powerful on their own that special weapons hardly ever seemed worth the trouble of learning their strats, and you could just spam charge shots and do a lot of damage. Especially in a game like X7 with such precise lock-on for X and Axel. But still, the weapons are more usable in N's edition than they ever were in the OG game. Obviously, this patch changes a lot of stuff, but instead of highlighting every little detail in depth, I'll rapid-fire some of the rest. Item pickups like heart tanks and sub-tanks make a much more audible sound, so you won't be left wondering if you got it or not. Annoying pickups like the heart and air forces have been moved so that they don't give as much of a hassle as they used to. Camera sections that used a bizarre bird's eye view have been given a more zoomed out camera angle, and then some sections that had a cramped camera angle give you a bird's eye view, which would actually help. I was stunned at the results screen when my hunter rank went up for the first time. This is a mechanic in X5 through X8, and in most of those games I never even knew what it was for. In X6, I knew your rank was tied to how many Nightmare Souls you collected, which contributed to how many parts you could equip, but in the other games I couldn't tell you what it actually did. In X7, I never paid it any mind because the rank was always low anyway. So when I was going from a C rank to a GA or PA hunter, I had to consult the Mega Man wiki just to find out what that even meant. It's just a mark to show how many enemies you defeated versus how much damage you took. Funny to know that the original game considered my performance pretty piss poor most of the time. So by the finale I was already pretty impressed, but all that was left was playing the final two stages. If you watched my Mega Man X levels ranked video, you'd know that the last levels of X7, Palace Road and Crimson Palace, were both in the bottom three. Crimson Palace ranked at the absolute bottom. It turns out fixing Palace Road is pretty simple. Just make the thing chasing you move at a pace where you won't fall asleep while playing. Yeah, that's the big change, and it made the stage feel totally different. I actually felt like I had to stay on my toes during this level or else. Shocking concept. And then Crimson Palace still suffers from many of the same issues, like this being the only level to even do the most basic of platforming, and it having way too much content for its own good. But with all the other changes in place, you can breeze through the regular segments, the boss with Red, the boss rush, and the final battle with Sigma without much hassle emerging from it. The final phase of Sigma noticeably having much less health than he used to. In the end, N's edition took me about 2 hours to beat. My most recent playthrough of X7 took me 3 hours and 39 minutes. It's the exact same game with so many adjustments to the pacing of it that it knocked an entire hour and 40 minutes off the runtime, which was all fluff, cutscenes, and other garbage. But with all that said, does N's edition fix Mega Man X7? Well, that depends on your definition of fixed. If you're hoping for this to turn X7 into the next game to rival Mega Man X1 or X4 in quality, this just won't do it. Mega Man X7 N's Edition is a patch designed by a singular person that is working within the confines of the original work. Yeah, it still has awful voice acting and shitty cutscenes. The level design is still very basic and doesn't do much platforming until the very end. Item placement is usually on the obvious and repetitive side. Many boss fights are fixed by simply making them quicker and easier. It is still designed to where you need to lock on in 2D because that's just the game, etc, etc, etc. Something like PO6 was made from scratch, so you can just make the gameplay way more fun in whatever way the team wants and can make small changes to the level design as well. a luxury this patch does not have. So the patch doesn't fundamentally fix a lot of the core issues with X7, but when keeping in mind what this patch is, I'm very impressed by it. When just looking at the gameplay experience, I'd still play most any other X game over this, but N's Edition takes a game I'd give an E or an F if I felt like being harsh, to a game I'd consider worthy of a C-. It has enough core issues to where a D grade is still fair, but I thought the experience I had with it was pretty pleasant. Which is how I usually view games I give a C, as in it's got problems, maybe even a lot of problems, but I didn't not enjoy the experience. What I'm trying to say is, it's got many issues, sure, but what was done with the core experience makes X7 a much more fast-paced, satisfying game than it ever was before. If this was the X7 we got in 2003, I would consider it a perfectly harmless game. The worst X game, but not the dismal failure I think the original game was. But that's the beauty of ROM hacks. Many ROM hacks are purely cosmetic, like I said, and others are purely for comedic effect. Some allow developers, especially in the Sonic community, to take an old foundation and really transform it into something else. Here, we've seen many developers transform the experience of the X games, whether it be making them tough as nails or just improving the experience to make it more fun. I find that element of fan-developed games to be the most fun. Now, that was every game covered except X8. This game doesn't have any major ROM hacks, but who knows, maybe X8 N's Edition is right around the corner. There are certainly things about that game that I'd change if I was capable of making that sort of thing, but at least we do have Mega Man X8 16-bit, a fully done fan game by Alison DePaz. This transformed X8 from the game I don't really like on PS2 and into something styled like the SNES titles. You can download it from the link in the description. This is the part of the site where you download it from. You have to extract the file from the download, place it wherever on your computer you wish for it to be, and you do all that, and you're right as rain. Visually, I was blown away by this game immediately. X8 was a PS2 game that was fully modeled in 3D, but the art was incredibly unappealing in-game. Assets were low resolution and background elements just looked cheap. Models looked lifeless and the whole thing had a drabby atmosphere. Perhaps that was intentional, but I don't think it looked good. Compare Metal Valley from the original to what the new version does with it and it's night and day. This new version isn't some complex visual, it's an orange background with a sun. But I think that pops way more and is far more appealing than the cloudy brown sky from the original. Places where the OG X8 did have color maintain that appeal while making stages like Central White or Inferno look less bland. Like I said, the idea of the game is taking X8 and making it more like the Super Nintendo X trilogy. Thankfully, the art goes far beyond what those games were able to do though. For example, X8 16-bit is rendered in full widescreen. The SNES games only took up a small portion of the screen on a modern display because they're products of their time. When designing a game from scratch in the 2020s, you don't need to emulate that. X plays exactly how he did in the first 3 games, but they were able to add additional frames of animation for X when dashing, running, and attacking. There are also cool details like how if X is behind his or a boss's health bar, the bar will go semi-transparent so you can still see X. So in spirit, it's like those classic games and is emulating their appearance, but is making improvements, and I think that's fantastic. Far too many sprite-based games intentionally inherit the visual limitations from their inspiration, and I'm glad this game is not like that. The game even contains the full story of X8. Cutscene presentation is very similar to the original X trilogy, with dialogue that's pretty familiar if you played the original game, just with parts changed because X is the only playable character here, but I'll get back to that fact later. I'm just setting it up to say that you can still get the X8 story out of this too, or not because you can skip the cutscenes by pressing the start button when dialogue begins, which is what I did most of the time because I was focusing my attention on the game design. The biggest question for me going into this was, how accurate are these levels to the original X8? I was most curious about that because I don't think the original X8 is a fun game. It gets a lot right. I think it has excellent controls, the partner mechanics are solid, and I like the different navigators you can use. It was a game that had a lot going for it, but I think they dropped the ball on the level design. X8 levels usually didn't focus on Mega Man X platforming, it was instead a roster of gimmicks you'd be forced to endure with mixed results. When playing the OG X8, I always start with Metal Valley, so I did the same when I first played the demo for this, and you get chased by a giant mechanoid at the start just like the original. But right around when I was expecting to do the bit with the switch that leads you to chasing the machine back to the beginning, the mech walked into a giant pit of spikes and blew up. You then travel inside a cave that brings you into the facility where the boss fight is. It was in that moment where I knew I was dealing with a completely different beast. In the following section, you see a sub-tank surrounded by spikes, and I knew there was probably some way to get it, but I tried to get it without dying by jumping into it and air dashing back to the platform. To no avail, because I died. But it was really satisfying, and it reminded me of the excitement of getting the heart tank in Desert Base from X2. Then the boss fight kicked my butt, and after a few tries I managed to win. My experience with this level was when I had the feeling this was going to be something grand. On this run for the video, I started with Booster Forest, but I thought that Metal Valley experience was worth sharing again because it was so crucial to my love of the remake. X8 16-bit takes inspiration from X8's levels, but it has completely original level design. This is absolutely for the best. Dynasty is a stage where you did nothing but blast the boss you were chasing until he's had enough and you fight him. X8 16-bit takes the fact that this level was all about the ride chaser and builds a proper stage out of it. There will be enemies to fight, dashing and wall jumping challenges, needing to make sure your ride chaser doesn't blow up, and using it to reach hidden secrets like the heart tank and the Dr. Light capsule. It's a real stage now. Inferno was one that had this boring rising platform section at the beginning that wouldn't let you just jump down because that would be an instant kill. Then the level had another one in reverse after the boss fight. I don't like that level either. Now the platforming section's more tolerable since it's not an auto-scroller, so you can go at your own pace. The pipes section is underwater, giving you the water physics to play around with, and you dodge a fire wave for a section and then fight the boss and the stage is over. Much better designed. Central White was awful because you just sat there on a ride chaser for 5 boring-ass minutes. Like Dynasty, this has also been transformed into a proper stage where you get these higher and faster routes if you keep your bike from blowing up and can use it to reach secrets. And that's the best thing I can say about X8 16-bit. It never tosses out a good idea from the original game. It keeps good ideas and makes them infinitely more fun, like how Troya Base focuses on ranked challenges. This level is completely different here, but is also about rankings. In the original, you'd have to go through floor after floor of killing enemies under a time limit, but you could quickly clear it with Zero's spinning attack. It was a snooze fest. To get every item, you'd have to play it twice, too. In the fan-made edition, the challenge is that to get to the heart tank, sub-tank, and Dr. Light capsule, you need to get through these 3 rooms with an A rank or higher. To get the rank up, you need to blast enemies and keep the pace up, or the rank will drop like the style meter in a Devil May Cry game. This combines X's shooting mechanics with its fast-paced gameplay, and it's really rewarding to master. Made especially satisfying if you have the arm parts of the Icarus armor, which creates a giant beam that does continuous damage. The level's a lot like Cyberspace from Mega Man X4, only even better. And then a stage like Pitch Black is very faithful to the original X8, but the level's designed in a way that makes it more satisfying to navigate the stealth sections and the parts in the darkness, as you use your special weapons to illuminate the rooms, each one having its own cool-looking effect. Booster Forest and Primrose are very faithful to the original game, but it's just been streamlined so much because making these ideas work in an SNES-styled X game automatically cuts out a lot of the fluff that was in the original. Something I wasn't sure about with this game before I played it was X being the only playable character. I believe this was done for the sake of SNES accuracy. Zero was a major part of the SNES trilogy, but X was obviously the main character you played as, so Axel and Zero were not playable in the original X8 16-bit. But modders have stepped in to answer the prayers of many fans. Modder Zashiko and his associates uploaded a modded version of the game to Discord. It is a full application of its own. You don't have to alter the files of the original X8 demake to play it. With it, you can access X8 16-bit exactly as it was where you played as X, or you can toggle on a bunch of new features and play as Axel. It has a fully 16-bit soundtrack where the tracks from X8 are remixed, it has the ability to disable the double dash input, you can skip the gateway boss rush levels, something I definitely turned on, and more. Axel plays like he did in the original game, where he shoots in multiple directions while stationary. He has the copy shot and a giga attack, and he can roll and hover and all that. But what I noticed was that Axel made X8 16-bit way more difficult. I died to the intro stage boss and had a hell of a time trying to get through the game as him. Axel not being able to move while shooting was a fundamental change that made everything more difficult, like getting S ranks in Troya Base or escaping this mechanoid that chases you in Metal Valley. I was getting game overs left and right and was only able to make some headway when I realized you could switch to X in the equipment menu. I wish you could switch characters on the fly like in X3 or do the team-ups of the original game, because X is the only one who can collect light capsules, which further incentivizes just using him. But still, Axel was a worthy addition to the game via a mod, and I'm glad it exists, even if I don't really like playing as him nearly as much as X. But if you want the game to be more difficult, definitely grab this mod. The developer was working on a Zero mod which added him to the game, and it looks stellar from the footage on YouTube, but it unfortunately never got fully finished and thus never got publicly released. This YouTuber called Dumbboy Mikey got a leaked version, and Zero looks great here. But I've never played it, so I can't really speak on it. If it does come out, I'll update the link in the description to include it. And since it looks so fun, if anybody wants to leak it to me, feel free to do so. But let's get back to glazing X8 16-bit's original release. With these redesigned stages, I thought there was never a dull moment, and I have greatly enjoyed all 5 of my playthroughs. Like I said a moment ago, the game reduces the complexity of the experience, allowing it to do more with X. For example, I thought X's special weapons were all pretty useless in the original game. The X-Buster was so powerful on its own, and you also had Zero and his plethora of tricks, and Axel as well. Now, special weapons feel far more useful since you have less combat options to work with. And then, I was amazed when Bamboo Pandemonium's weapon blew up spikes. No joke, throughout the whole game, this weapon can just destroy spike walls. X8 had a real hard-on for those as well, so it was extra satisfying to get them out of your way like this. When I first got this, I made the connection that this was how you're supposed to get the sub-tank in Metal Valley. But that's when it really hit me, that Mega Man X8 16-bit has an honest-to-God item game. One of my favorite things about the first 4 X games is how you could map out your route of the game according to what gear you'll need to acquire to get all the items in the game and play accordingly. Learning how to tackle the bosses in whatever order it took to achieve that goal. The problem with X5 through X8 is that they kept introducing so much extra crap into the games that made this process tedious or moot. I've ragged on each of these games for that in my various videos on them, but just keeping it to X8, Troya Base was a perfect example. Like I said, you had to play this level twice, because you got one upgrade for getting a high rank on every challenge, but then got a different one for getting a high rank on almost every challenge. So I'd have to intentionally tank my performance on one of them when playing the stage a second time. What intuitive game design. A lot of X8's exploration was just using some tool to find a rare metal that let you buy something in the shop, taking all the satisfaction out of discovering upgrades that were there in the other titles. This new version is the opposite of the original in that sense. I was immediately hooked on it because I was essentially playing a brand new X game with the same appeal as what I enjoy in the first 4, only now I don't know the game. So I had to gradually find my footing by trying different stages and exploring them top to bottom for upgrades and seeing if I could handle the bosses, often getting my ass kicked and being taken back to the stage select. But it was so much fun to get to play an X game like this because I have the others so memorized that playing them is like autopilot for me. Once I started beating some stages and getting some upgrades, I turned the tables on the game and was able to clean house in the back half. It was really rewarding. Something I really appreciated was how you can often get upgrades in more than one way. Like how in theory you get the heart tank in Inferno by using the Thunder Dancer to shut off this electricity thing, but a well-timed jump can get you to it. One must-have collectible is the light capsule in Booster Forest. This gives you the leg parts of the Icarus armor, which allows X to double jump. There are a bunch of ways to get this, and first of them is using the spike clearing method I was talking about earlier, but you need to beat the stage and come back to do it. However, if you have the fire and/or thunder weapons, you can dash over to it. Having multiple ways to get an item opens up the routing significantly. So I've had a lot of joy in experimenting with it, like how the sub-tank in Inferno could be grabbed with the double jump, or how you could use the charged Thunder Dancer if you have it in a set of arm parts. Or the ice weapon makes ice platforms in the lava, which is great. The 2 armor system works like the original where you can mix and match pieces between stages, the Icarus armor being my preference of the 2. The double jump and faster charging speed were great, and so was the screen-wide laser attack. X8 16-bit is full of elements that players can toy around with to see what they like the best. But if I may indulge in vanity for a moment, my absolute favorite thing about the item game in X8 16-bit is that apparently I had an impact on it without even knowing it. The developer commented on my original demo review and said that part of the reason why the item game is so open-ended is because of how much of a focus I put on it in my videos. Apparently, my talking about it so much while also not being a part of the speedrunning community was striking enough for it to make it a core part of the game. And I'm gonna take that shit all the way to the bank. I don't have a definitive least backtracking order for this game because I haven't played it enough to say what I think is the most effective for my playstyle yet. However, the great thing about the game is that there's so many ways to get all the different items anyway, that you really can just do whatever you want for the most part and probably get through just fine. But if I were to think of things I didn't like about this, it's not much. But I can say that I don't really like some of the boss desperation moves, like when a boss is running low on health, they'll do a crazy attack. It was like that in the original game, but back then you had 2 hunters to fight with. I mentioned this in my previous video, and some of them like Gigabolt Manowar felt more manageable to beat, but then others like Avalanche Yeti and Dark Mantis especially felt really difficult to fight and dodge when they were about to die. It's all doable if you got sub-tanks and heart tanks, but with the latter example, I really just don't know how you can dodge this attack. I've yet to figure it out. But we'll see if that gets changed in a later update or not. But speaking of bosses, this game, like the original, includes some secrets. I already talked about the gimmick from Troya Base with the rankings, but it gets even more interesting if you want to see all the content the game has to offer. If you complete a full S-rank run of every room in Troya Base without dying, and jump down this pit, you'll find a secret warp that leads to a battle with Cutman from Mega Man 1 on NES, like the original game. It even has a cool SNES-style remix of the Mega Man 1 boss theme. If you return to this point with no Armor X and all your sub-tanks and heart tanks disabled, you can battle against Red from Mega Man X7 in a really tough duel that puts the X7 one to shame. Not that I needed to say that, it was a given, but laughing at X7 is one of my favorite pastimes. Then, if you come back here again with whatever equipment you want, you can endure a battle with Serenade from Mega Man Battle Network 3, another tough boss encounter. I couldn't beat either this one or Red, just figured I'd go over all this secret content for those who wanted to know about it. The endgame was also totally new in this version. None of the previous builds had the final stages, so I was curious how this was going to play out. If you couldn't guess, I wasn't big on the original endgame either. The Jacob elevator was, as the name suggested, a long ride up where enemies kept dropping in. In my Mega Man X levels ranked, this one sat pretty low because there's nothing here in terms of platforming or challenge, it's just a lousy elevator fight sequence in a Mega Man game. This level has thankfully been done from scratch. You start on the ground, and while there are some parts with elevators, there are many portions where you need to do perilous platforming, like any good final stage before battling Vile at the top. The second of X8's final stages was the boss rush in a battle with a Sigma copy body. You can imagine, if you've seen any of my Mega Man videos, that I wasn't big on this level either. I think boss rushes in Mega Man games are some of the most boring to replay, especially with how Mega Man games design bosses, but the developer came in clutch yet again. You still have to refight all 8 bosses, but with a sick new twist. The 8 chambers are still in the room, but they take you to a platforming challenge related to that boss's level, where you grab a crystal at the end. After grabbing 2 crystals, you then fight those 2 bosses together. Repeat until you've done all 8. This is a pretty cool concept because it adds a new challenge to the boss rush, and there's some player choice in picking which 2 Mavericks you'll face together. It's like X Challenge from the Legacy Collection, but way better balanced. Yeah, hell is frozen over. X8 16-bit got me to say I liked the boss rush level of a Mega Man game. Wizardry at work. Though, I thought the ensuing Sigma battle felt kind of like a war of attrition in that he's super powerful and has attacks all over the screen. I just barely beat him. Then I learned another cool thing. If you use all your sub-tanks in a stage, they'll be refilled when you start another one, which is absolutely genius design that I never would have even thought of. It just cuts down the tedium of having to fill them up again. The final stage is pretty good too. I like how challenging this level is with the spikes in both the original game and the remake, so I'm glad it remained pretty faithful. The final boss will kick your ass though. You've got to survive Sigma in both phases of Lumine in one life. I was thinking of complaining about how hard it was, but that's just part of the game. I thought about how I used to think the final bosses of Mega Man X1 or 2 or 3 or 4 were hard, but nowadays I can beat pretty much all of those games without even using a sub-tank once. Practice makes perfect, and this game only just came out. It'll need some time before I'm comfortable with the boss design here. Best thing about it though is that the checkpoint has a bunch of health and an extra life right before Sigma, so you don't need to worry about sub-tanks at all. You get to refill them every time you die. After like 20 minutes of trying, I beat it after only using 3 sub-tanks, and that was really satisfying, like it was when I first beat those first 4 X games. And that's the beautiful thing about this game. I talk about it like it's a God's honest new X game, because it is. In every respect, from the controls to the animation to the game design, it represents all the best the X series has been, and then some. I'm not going to say I like it more than the first 4 games, I don't have the emotional attachment to this that I do those first 4 installments, but in terms of design, it's really fucking solid and is a worthy follow-up to the Mega Man X saga. If you're a Mega Man fan clamoring for more content and you don't play this, I don't know what to tell you. You've got a new game right here, and I'm almost confident anything could run it. Special thanks to Allison DePaz for working so hard to make such a fun game.
And thanks to the mod team for further extending the shelf life of what is one of my favorite X games. Which is what all great ROM hacks do. And that's the theme of the video. If you're interested in any of the games featured here, I have a master document in the description you can check out with links to every game. But other than that, I don't have much else to add, so I hope everyone enjoyed this trip through the Mega Man X series in ROM hack form, and looks forward to the cool videos coming up on the horizon. But until that time comes, I'll close by saying what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.